rules. We have 30 minutes now for debate and discussion. Again, let me remind you how you get the floor, which is to tap your name badge on the left side of the microphone, touch the screen either left or right, and then press the silver button, and then I'll recognize you. We have a few already, but room for a few more, so do please join the queue. Let me first invite an Australian, Dr. Michael Fulilove, to make the first question. Michael.
Thank you, John. My question is to the Australian Defence Minister, Senator Payne. Senator, first of all, let me congratulate you on your thoughtful speech, and in particular associate myself with the strong remarks you made on the rules-based order, which reinforce, as you say, the themes in the Defence White Paper and the Foreign Policy White Paper. A strong order is in the interests of most countries that are represented at Shangri-La. But the problem, as you know, is that the current occupants of Zhongnan High and indeed the White House are not exactly famous supporters of the rules-based order. And indeed, I would argue that countries like Australia are having to hedge against dual risks of a reckless China and a feckless United States. So my question is, what can middle powers do with each other in the security sphere to support the rules-based order until the traditional linchpin of the order, Washington, returns, until the fever in Washington passes? And if I can put it a bit more sharply, how much is Australia prepared to risk in terms of its other interests in order to defend the rules-based order?
Thanks. Well, as before, we'll take 3 or 4 questions to make certain that the panelists can give their most considered replies to these sharp points. Next, Dr. Chong Jia-Yan from Singapore.
Thank you. My question goes actually to all 3 panelists, because really the issue of ASEAN has come up several times, and I'm quite curious as to how you think there can be concrete investment to ensure ASEAN centrality in a meaningful way, whatever that means. ASEAN centrality has been floated around quite a few times, given the fact that what we've heard is that different ASEAN members have very different priorities and interests, which include some suspicion towards giving greater authority and ability to ASEAN as an institution, and also the allegations of increased external influence in domestic affairs. Thank you.
Thank you. And next, from the Philippines, Dr. Rommel Banloy.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I have a question to Mr. Defense Secretary of Indonesia. Last January, Southeast Asian countries launched the Our IISS initiative. What happened to that initiative? You're supposed to meet twice a week. 2 times a week, are you really meeting? And are you really exchanging intelligence information about terrorist threats in the Philippines? And then in the region? And I have a question also to the Defense Minister of Vietnam. Philippines and Vietnam used to hold friendly games in the Spratlys. What happened? Why it was stopped? Thank you.
Thank you. And next, from the IISS, Alexander Neil.
Thank you, John. I'd like to pose a question to both Minister Lich and to Minister Ryacudu. We've heard an awful lot about the Indo-Pacific over the last 24 hours or so. Prime Minister Modi really underlined that, and we heard from Secretary of Defense Mattis this morning as well. Very deep underlining of this concept, this construct of the Indo-Pacific. And I'd like to ask these 2 ministers how the construct of the Indo-Pacific sits within their own defense policies. Thank you.
From Vietnam, Dr. Wong Lê Thu.
Hi, Wong Lê Thu from Australian Strategic Policy Institute. I have 2 questions. One for Minister Lich. Thank you for bringing back the concept of preventive diplomacy and confidence-building measures. My question is, looking forward, evolving the security order, how should we revise confidence-building measures given that over the last several decades, I think confidence has grown in selective actors and has decreased in many others, including multilateral institutions. And if I may, to Minister Payne, again, on the concept of Indo-Pacific, can we have the principles of open and free region without changing the name? Or is Asia-Pacific not free and open? Thank you.
And finally, Amir Farid from Malaysia.
Hi, thank you, Dr. Chipman. My question is to Minister Ryacudu and General Lich. Well, first is to Minister Ryacudu. You spoke about the trilateral cooperation agreement between Indonesia, Malaysia, and the Philippines. Will we be seeing, as this is definitely an interesting development, will these subgroups or caucuses form within ASEAN be the new way forward in terms of our defense order? And if that does happen, if we continue to be in this, to work operationally in these caucuses, how will that impact ASEAN? Because the 10 member states usually, apart from meetings, don't do things very much operationally. So is this the new norm that we will all expect? Thank you.
Thank you. And I think what I'll do now is I'll take one final question and then give each of the ministers 3 minutes each to give answers to the questions that were posed directly to them. And I'll ask them to do so in the same order in which they originally spoke. So the Minister of Defense of Vietnam, then Minister Ryacudu, then Senator Payne. But the final question then this morning from Major General Yao from China.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. My question also has to do with Indo-Pacific. From the Prime Minister Modi's speech last night, Indo-Pacific seems to be a geographical concept, which is a natural region, and India wants to develop policies because based on the the natural, based on the concept that is natural. But from today's, from Secretary Marty's remarks today, Indo-Pacific is a strategy, and he has laid very clearly the things that United States is going to do to have coherent policies and strategies over a vast area from the shores of the Africa to the shores of Americas. So my question is how each country regard Indo-Pacific. Is it you regard your country, the three speakers, as a part or a central part in it, or you have to formulate policies based on the more strategic or geographical or geostrategic level to maybe to cope with new challenges and to use new opportunities.
General, yeah, thank you so much. Actually, we will take one more question, and I think I'll just slightly change the order of reply, if that's all right, and have Minister of Defense of Indonesia answer first, then Minister of Vietnam, then Senator Payne. But we'll bring in one more country, Seng Pan from Myanmar.
My question is towards Defense Minister of Indonesia. And in your speech, you mentioned about third-generation terrorism, which is using social media in a way of financial support, in a way of recruitment, and in Western Myanmar and Southern Philippines. In that case, how well ASEAN is prepared for the early warning systems for Counterterrorism Act, and there is February 2018 ASEAN Defense Minister, which is committed for stronger cooperations in the region for counterterrorism. So how well ASEAN is prepared in terrorist strengthening networks in the ASEAN region, in the areas of recruitment, tracking financial support from different parts of the world, and the role of social media in recruitment, especially for the terrorist group. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Those were all very sharp, hard, and in some cases broad questions. I'll give each minister 3 minutes to respond to those, and then we'll close just before 1 o'clock in order to give time for everyone to go to the ministerial lunch and to the other meetings that they have over the next 2 hours. So please, first, Minister of Defense of Indonesia.
Thank you so much for all the questions. The first one related to about the impartiality and about the intervention about ASEAN nation. I believe that the question is about, that's the first question. I would like to answer related to the suspicion among ASEAN members. There is no suspicion among ASEAN member states. In fact, this cooperation can strengthen our solidarity and unification. As I mentioned, that we have to enlarge our similarities and commonalities and decrease our divide. I don't see any interference among nations in ASEAN. ASEAN is very strong. ASEAN, after the 50 years anniversary, ASEAN is getting more solid and more stronger. And related to our IISS, related to the development, how is the concrete operational of this our IISS concept? We already discussed and make a deliberation how the operation it is supposed to be materialized. And I discussed with the Defense Minister of Singapore. We already keep having a meeting, and even with the Australian Defense Minister and Malaysian Defense Minister and the Philippine Defense Minister, and also other defense ministers. But the involvement, it is the country that have a direct challenges. Like the Philippines, Malaysia, we have like a very regular base communication and coordination. As I mentioned, the implementation of this IISS is starting from the trilateral arrangement in the three nations. We are susceptible to terrorism threat, like the southern Philippines and the east and northern part of Indonesia, and Malaysia is their lane or their path before they're coming to our nation. To get the right information, so we can have a direct response. We already make coordination. And I discussed with Secretary Mattis also when during my bilateral meeting in Hawaii. I mentioned to him also, and America, US also will support us related to our IISS. Yes, we already keep making communication and coordination, and we also exchange our information. And we already come to our consensus, and in 1 or 2 months from now, or 2 months, this organization will be implemented and state-by-state basis. And the first step is about the sharing information first. And second, and the next one is about the Indo-Pacific concept and order, how Indonesia look at the Indo-Pacific in order to design our defense strategy. Indonesia is located in the middle between Pacific Ocean and Indian Ocean. So that's why our defense strategy have to adapt and adopt with the development of a situation in the Pacific. And we have to make communication and deliberation, like we have like a Shangri-La Dialogue. like Defence Minister of ASEAN, and even the Defence Minister of ASEAN, we keep having like a regular meeting almost 5 to 6 times a year, so that we discuss about any issue. As I mentioned, our factual threat, the open war or the conventional war, I don't see any potential threat. Indonesia consider the most factual threat is terrorism. To tackle the terrorist threat, as I already mentioned, that the first one, we conduct the trilateral operation in Sulawesi, and also the cooperate in Gulf of Thailand patrol, and also in the Malacca Strait. It is about the traffic of the terrorist group. So we have conducted this endeavor. It doesn't much change our defense strategy, but at the moment, we have to strengthen our IT or information technology capability. Like the US, like the big country, they have the more sophisticated and more advanced technology. So that's why we need their support and assistance to detect and to locate the position of this extremist group. And other issue related to about the trilateral engagement. About trilateral, these three countries was most affected by this terror threat, especially Indonesia and the Philippines. While they are different, they try to hide in these rebel groups or the separatists. Like Indonesia, we are many Muslim, and there are many radical Muslim in Indonesia. They try to hide in this group. So that I would like to also to include Thailand, because in Thailand they have also the radical Muslim in the southern Thailand. We already make communication there, but I believe my friends from different other ASEAN countries will also support us, and one day we will be together to address this issue. And other issue, how we see the perspective of threat from the Indo-Pacific perspective. As I mentioned earlier, that this the maritime axis ranging from South China Sea and to this Indian Ocean, it will pass the Indo-Pacific. And to tackle any security development, we already have the strategy. It doesn't much change our defense strategy that already exists. And finally, about cooperation, whether ASEAN will be ready to anticipate any development. Yes. Like the trilateral, the sub-regional cooperation like trilateral will also will include other nations. It is starting from the trilateral because the center of the threat is in these trilateral countries. So we have to face them, then locate this potential threat. The reason why IS move to East Asia, and the center near in the trilateral countries. So that's why we have to focus on this trilateral. So that's why we have to focus on the trilateral arrangement first, because it is very important. Australia also support us, give our assistance. Japan also. That's we greatly appreciate it. That's all my answer. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Minister Lich of Vietnam. Thank you.
Thank you for the question and the consideration to ASEAN. First of all, I very much agree with what the Indonesian have minister just answered before me. The centrality of ASEAN. I agree with Mr. Minister of Indonesia, and I'd like to focus that in the past few years, ASEAN has been playing a very important role to maintain and promote the peace and stability in the region. ASEAN has shown the consensus, the solidarity, and I think this is one of the reasons why we have a positive outcome and the role and promote the role of ASEAN in the past few years. However, in this situation, there's a lot of complexity. So ASEAN, we are facing new challenges. These challenges require us, member states, need to promote our solidarity and unity via a discussion, dialogue, directly or through forums to create a common voice of a solid and unite ASEAN that retain the centrality and promote and contribute to peace and stability of the region. ASEAN will continue to have a good relation with external partners so that we can positively contribute to the region of Southeast Asia and Asia Pacific and beyond. Secondly, you have a question regarding why Vietnam, Philippines not having the island exchange program. I'd like to answer that this question, we still have the island exchange and between the two countries within ASEAN on the field. However, every year, based on the current situation, we will agree upon, maybe this year we just postpone or maybe have it earlier in the year or later at the year, what to stop. And the relation and exchange between Vietnam and Philippines is very plentiful, and it's to promote the unity and solidarity between Vietnam and the Philippines. 2017, we hosted, and we expect the 2018, Philippines will host this exchange. Third question is, you have asked that around the viewpoint of Vietnam around the Indo-Pacific strategy, whether we can change the defense strategy. I'd like to share that. First of all, we support the Indo-Pacific, like Prime Minister Modi have said. I'd like to take this opportunity. I'd like to say that the bilateral exchange between me and my U.S. counterpart, I have mentioned that as well. He will also said that we want to put it in the policy of each country. First, we agree. However, we need to study the actual content so that we can fit our policy in. So I'd like to reiterate that we support, but then we need to study closer the content of the strategy, Indo-Pacific strategy. Fourth is the confidence building and preventive diplomacy. I believe that we have relation. First, we need to have trust. With trust is the foundation for us to design other activities, so that we have to exchange and discuss to have understand each other, and we come each other with goodwill on the basis of international law and to align your interests with your partner's interests. So I believe that the trust and trust building, confidence building has to be in goodwill and in accordance with international law. I'd like to thank you for all the questions that you have raised.
Thank you very much, John and colleagues. I know we're up against time, and Eng Hen will be very upset with me if I delay the ministerial lunch by any significant amount. So I'm going to try and distill Michael's question, as entertaining as it was, to an observation about what middle order nations effectively can do to protect the rules-based global order in their engagements. And as my friends in uniform would say, really lean forward on that in terms of what is already happening. And I think that there is a massive underestimation about the quantum of engagement and cooperation and the capacity of the nations of the region to work together and to do so almost every day of the week in a range of ways, whether it's official to official or military to military, from my perspective as a defence minister, and from minister to minister. So just in the meetings that I've had in the 2 days or the day and a half since I've been here, the sorts of pieces of regional architecture that underpin our relationships, not so much a Tetris effort, but more a Venn diagram about where intersections exist and already happen every day of the week, that don't rely on any one major power to help them to function or to be activated. Those organisations include the ADMM+, which General Lich has said is going to be celebrating its 10th event in 2020. The Five Power Defence Arrangement, a smaller group, often not recognised, but one which is going to be doing its 50th year stocktake in 2021. The South Pacific Defence Ministers meeting, a really new piece of regional architecture, but one after, I think, 6 years or so that engages not just Australia and New Zealand, but France and Tonga and Papua New Guinea, Chile, Fiji, a range of nations. Obviously, ASEAN itself and the work that we engage in from Australia's perspective to amplify and to develop our relationship right across ASEAN. The ASEAN Special Summit is in March of this year is a very good example of that. Those activities, plus a range of other things, all help us to develop right across the region habits of cooperation, of familiarity, of interoperability. They help us to build relationships. They help us to work on responsiveness. The sub-regional ministers meeting on counter-terrorism that I held in Perth in February of this year, another step in that direction of working amongst the powers of the region, the countries of the region, to ensure that we are fully engaged on the most significant challenges that face us. In the Defence White Paper in 2016, Australia indicated that we would be significantly ramping up our international engagement from a defence perspective, and we have done a great deal of work in that regard. Last year we sent the largest joint task group into the region that we had in 40 years, and the breadth of engagement of that across Southeast Asia, something like 36 activities, 6 of those major exercises, port visits in excess of a dozen, and a number of other smaller engagements from some of the single vessels. All of those things work to build our capacity to work more broadly in the region. I said in my remarks that, and sorry, before I finish on Indo-Pacific Endeavour, that was 2017. Indo-Pacific Endeavour 2018 has literally just left Australia's shores, heading into the Pacific, visiting Fiji, the Solomon Islands, Tonga, and a number of other countries which immediately slipped my mind. But again, a very powerful message of working with our partners right across the region. I said in my remarks that the Australia-Japan-US trilateral, just as another example of how we engage with both small and large groupings, is well established, and we are keen to work very, very actively to maximise the cohesion of nations that share our vision for the region. If I can finish on the second question that was asked of me in relation to the nomenclature that we use for the region. For Australia, if you sit with the Pacific Ocean on the side of the country in which I reside, in Sydney, and you traverse the continent to the west, and you sit with my colleagues in Perth in Western Australia where the Indian Ocean laps the shores, then for us, the concept of working across the Indo-Pacific is not new, and it's one which we embrace fully. We are a member of the various Indian Ocean organisations, whether it's the Naval Symposium or the IORA. All of those things have been part of Australia's strategic life for some time now. Most certainly our interest is very broad, and one which I'm very, very pleased to have had an opportunity to share here at Shangri-La today.
Senator. Minister, thank you very much, and especially for that exuberant boost to middle power influence in the Indo-Pacific. A splendid way to end this morning's very charged program. If you would all join me in thanking the three ministers for their presentations, and all of you have a very good lunch indeed. Thank you.